wish I could marry her, Caleb whispered, thinking she couldn't hear him. Ara's fox ears twitched. Then she turned, amber eyes catching his. Her voice was soft, certain. My answer is yes. If you love human and alien romances with warmth, laughter, and heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Evening light pulled through the apartment window, painting dust mo's gold. The hum of city traffic below blended with the quiet clatter of chopsticks and a kettle whistling on the counter. Caleb sat on the couch, sleeves rolled up, tools scattered beside him as he half-fixed, half-dismantled a sputtering coffee machine. AR was perched across from him, her tail swaying lazily over the armrest, a mischievous smile tugging at her lips as she slurped instant noodles straight from the pot. She was impossible to ignore. Her red hair seemed to catch every flicker of light, and those vulpine ears twitched at every small sound like living radar. Life with her was chaos wrapped in warmth. She had no idea how rent worked. Thought detergent pods were candy, and once tried to microwave socks to make them fluffy again. And yet somehow Caleb couldn't imagine a quieter evening without her. She hummed softly, tail flicking as if in rhythm, and said, "You sigh a lot when you look at me, you know." Caleb blinked, embarrassed. "Do I?" She smirked loudly. He chuckled, pretending to focus on the coffee machine again. But under his breath, so quietly even he could barely hear it, he whispered words that had been pressing at the back of his heart for weeks. "I wish I could marry her." He thought the words would vanish into the city's hum, but Era's ears twitched once, ever so slightly, and her smile deepened. Caleb had learned through trial and emotional turbulence that living with a foxwoman was both a blessing and a slow descent into adorable insanity. It started 3 months ago, when his landlord finally approved a shared teeny option. He needed the extra income, and Ira, freshly transferred to the city under the new interspecies exchange program, needed a place that didn't treat her like a tourist attraction. She'd arrived with a single duffel bag, a half-eaten box of sweet rice biscuits, and a tail that almost got caught in the elevator door before she even reached his floor. That had been their first incident. Now the apartment constantly smelled faintly of her herbal shampoos and the spicy snacks she hoarded in the cupboards. A fine layer of orange fur dusted his couch. No matter how many lint rollers he went through, he'd stop complaining somewhere between the second and third week, when he realized that every time he sighed about it, would get this guilty look and start brushing her tail obsessively, muttering, "I'm molting responsibly." I swear he didn't have the heart to stay annoyed. Hera, for her part, adapted surprisingly well, just not gracefully. Human technology seemed to fascinate and confuse her in equal measure. The coffee maker, for instance, had become her mortal enemy. She'd declared it a metal beast that hisses at me, and one morning, in an attempt to tame it, she'd wrapped it in a towel to calm its spirit. The resulting short circuit took out power for half the building. Maybe appliances don't have spirits, Caleb had suggested, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a screwdriver in hand, trying to repair the melted fuse. Ara crossed her arms, nose twitching indignantly. Everything has a spirit, Caleb. Even angry metal ones that spit steam and smell like burnt toast. He'd laughed, and she glared, though her ears betrayed her by twitching toward him like they always did when she was trying not to smile. Their domestic rhythm had slowly taken shape after that. Caleb handled rent, bills, and anything that required logical sequencing. Era handled vibes. She filled the air with humming, laughter, and the constant chatter of curiosity that made the small apartment feel alive. When she wasn't at her part-time job at a local cafe, where she had already been crowned employee most likely to break a blender with enthusiasm, she was either sprawled across the couch watching old human dramas, or perched on the kitchen counter watching Caleb cook. "You chop vegetables too neatly," she'd said once, tilting her head as he diced peppers with mechanical precision. "Is that a compliment?" "It's suspicious." He'd rolled his eyes. "How can cutting food be suspicious?" "Because it's too quiet. You move like you're afraid of waking the world." That line had stuck with him. He didn't know how she noticed things like that. Small invisible parts of him that no one else ever seemed to. She had a way of hearing the things people didn't say. Maybe it was the fox ears. Or maybe it was just a LRA. Every night before bed, she'd curl up under a blanket on the couch instead of using her actual room. She claimed it felt more Denike. Caleb had offered to buy her a proper mattress at least 6 times. She'd declined every time. Beds are too flat. She'd argued. No corners, no coziness. So the couch became her territory, complete with her pile of pillows, half-read books, and a small lantern she brought from her village. When it glowed soft and blue, it made the apartment feel like another world entirely. Half urban sprawl, half forest dream. Some nights, when the hum of the city faded and her breathing evened out, he'd glance her way and wonder what she was dreaming of. She smiled a lot in her sleep. Sometimes her tail swished as though chasing something pleasant through her mind. And in those quiet moments, he'd whisper small things he thought she'd never hear. Compliments. Thanks. Words too heavy to say when she was awake. You're chaos, but good chaos. Don't ever leave. I wish I could marry you. He told himself it was harmless. That it was just wishful thinking. That she couldn't possibly hear him from across the room. But Era's ears, even in sleep, would twitch. One morning, Caleb woke to the sound of humming and the scent of something burning. He stumbled into the kitchen, half-dressed, hair sticking up, and froze. Ayera stood over the stove, wielding a frying pan and an expression of intense concentration. Smoke coiled lazily from the pan, like it was performing a magic trick. "What are you doing?" he croaked. She blinked innocently. "Breakfast." He eyed the charred shapes. "That's toaster bread, Era. It goes in the toaster." "Not anymore. The toaster and I have history." He sighed. "You set it on fire once." "It set me on fire once. My fur still smells faintly of betrayal." She puffed her cheeks, then broke into laughter, tail flicking wildly. Caleb couldn't help but laugh, too, even as he reached for the fire extinguisher, just in case. Their mornings were like that, half disaster, half miracle. He fixed whatever she broke. She filled the silence. He never realized weighed so much. And somehow they met in the middle, where chaos became comfort. That night, as the city lights flickered through the curtains, Era sat on the couch brushing her tail. She caught him watching her and tilted her head. "What is it?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Just thinking you're surprisingly good at being bad at everything." She laughed, bright and easy. "Then I must be the best at it." Her laughter filled the apartment. Caleb turned away, pretending to be busy fixing the lamp, his lips moving barely above a whisper. "I really do wish I could marry her." The words vanished into the hum of the city, or so he thought. Ayera's ears twitched. She smiled, and she kept brushing her tail. The apartment's laundry day had become a full-blown cultural exchange program. Caleb had been folding shirts at the counter, methodically stacking them into neat piles. Era, meanwhile, had declared herself minister of soft things, and was twirling a bedsheet like a ceremonial flag. Every time she tried to fold something, it ended up as a triangle, no matter its shape or size. "Why do you keep folding them like that?" Caleb asked, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It's the foxfold," she said proudly. "Compact, traditional, sacred." He held up one of her shirts, now resembling a misshapen pastry. "It looks like a sandwich." "Sacred sandwich," she corrected, smirking. "You humans have too many rules for folding. Square, rectangle, roll, so boring. The triangle is the most stable shape in nature. It's a shirt, not a bridge. Then maybe your bridges should be softer." She flashed a grin that made it impossible for him to stay serious. Her tail wagged lazily behind her, swaying in rhythm with her humming. The washing machine beeped, and she gasped dramatically, like she just received a message from the gods. "It speaks." "It's finished the cycle," Caleb said, trying not to laugh. Ira crouched beside the machine, ears perked. "You mean the spirit is satisfied?" He leaned against the counter. "Sure, let's call it that." I opened the door with both hands like she was unveiling a treasure chest. Steam puffed out, and her face lit up in wonder. "It's warm," she whispered, reaching in and burying her hands in the clean clothes. "They're alive," Caleb chuckled. "You're dangerously close to becoming a laundry cultist. I'll start my own sect, the Order of the Eternal Spin." By now, her fur was dusted with detergent flakes, her hair tied in a loose braid that she'd given up on halfway through. She looked both exasperating and heartbreakingly adorable, the kind of chaos that didn't feel like a mess, more like a living sunrise that refused to fit in a box. When the final batch was done, Caleb grabbed a basket and headed toward the balcony to hang a few delicate pieces. Ara followed, balancing the rest on her head for no reason other than whimsy. "Do all humans dry clothes in the open air?" she asked, handing him clothespins. "Not all," he said. "Some use dryers. I just like the smell of real air. Ah, scent bonding." He raised a brow. "Excuse me?" She smiled slightly. "Where I'm from, couples hang their clothes together, so their scents mix. That way, their homes start to smell like each other." Caleb froze mid-pin. "That's oddly sweet." "It's practical," she said, pretending not to notice his flustered expression. "If your mate smells familiar, you're less likely to bite them during disagreements." He coughed. "Charming tradition." "Thank you. We have many." She tilted her head, eyes glimmering with amusement. "You're blushing, human." "I'm not. You are." "Your face is pink." She leaned closer, tail swaying behind her like a pendulum of mischief. "Maybe you're imagining our clothes hanging together?" He fumbled with the clothespin and dropped it. "You're impossible, and you're predictable." She laughed, stepping back just enough to give him space, but the smile stayed. Later that afternoon, while Caleb sat at his desk repairing a client's data tablet, Era appeared beside him with a cup of tea. She set it down gently, her voice softening. "I like this," she said. "Doing small things together." He looked up, surprised. "Laundry life." Her gaze was earnest now, her teasing gone. "Back home, everything was noisy. Everyone watching, judging here, it's quiet. You let things be quiet." "I like that." Caleb met her eyes, unsure how to respond. "You make quiet feel less empty," he said finally. She blinked, caught off guard. For a moment, the air between them shifted. Something unspoken, warm, delicate as steam from her tea. Then she laughed it off, shaking her head. "Careful, human. If you keep saying things like that, I might start thinking you like me." He smiled faintly. "I didn't say I didn't." Her ears twitched, subtle, but he noticed. Maybe I'll pretend I didn't hear that." She walked away humming, tail flicking in rhythm to some tune only she knew. That night after she'd fallen asleep on the couch again, Caleb found one of her triangular foxfold shirts left on the table. He picked it up, refolded neatly, then hesitated. On impulse, he unfolded it again just once and reshaped it into a triangle before setting it back down. It wasn't efficient, but somehow it felt right. He sat on the edge of the couch, watching her sleep, the city lights tracing soft shadows across her face. "She's impossible," he whispered. Her ears twitched in her dreams, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. It started with a screw, one single tiny screw. Caleb had been on the floor beneath his old hoverbike, trying to coax life back into its stubborn engine. The thing was ancient, half rusted, half hope. Every repair felt like resurrecting a museum piece. He'd been at it for an hour when crouched beside him, holding a wrench upside down like a sword. "Do I hit it or twist it?" she asked seriously. "Neither," he muttered, not looking up. "Please don't hit anything that still has value," she pouted, tail flicking behind her. "You humans are no fun. In fox tribes, we fix things by talking to them or offering shiny rocks." Caleb snorted. "Pretty sure this bike has lost faith in both humanity and geology." Ira leaned closer, studying his hands. "You're very gentle with broken things," she said, her voice quieter now. "You talk to them too, don't you?" He hesitated, caught off guard. Sometimes, he admitted, old habits. Her ears perked slightly, curiosity gleaming. "You fix machines like you'd fix people. I'm better with the first category." She hummed thoughtfully, then reached for a rag. "Then let me help. If we both talk to it, maybe it'll listen." "Fine," he said, amused. "Just don't touch." There was a clang followed by a yelp and then a thud. She had leaned in too far, her tail brushing the still spinning wheel. It caught a strand of fur and yanked. Not hard enough to hurt, but definitely hard enough to shock. Her ears flattened. Her tail puffed up twice its normal size, and she stared at him in sheer horror. "It attacked me," she cried. "It's a motor," he said, trying not to laugh. You leaned into it. "It moved first." He bit his lip to hide a grin as she turned in a slow circle, examining her tail like a wounded soldier, checking a battle scar. "Are you hurt?" "My pride is mortally wounded," she muttered. "Let me see." "No, you'll laugh." "I'm not laughing." "You're absolutely laughing." "I'm not," he said, and immediately failed to contain a chuckle when her tail puffed again like a startled duster. "That's it," she declared, marching off toward the bathroom. "You have lost tail privileges." "Tail privileges?" "You heard me." He couldn't stop grinning. "When exactly did I get those privileges?" She froze at the doorway, looking over her shoulder with a little smirk. "You didn't. You just almost earned them." And then she vanished into the bathroom, leaving him in stunned silence, wrench still in hand. When she emerged later, her tail was still slightly frizzed, but she pretended nothing had happened. Caleb was sitting on the couch trying to finish a diagnostic skin while his brain replayed that you almost random line like a stuck record. Ira plopped beside him, holding a mug of tea. Still angry at my tail, he gave her a look. "You were the one who yelled at the bike." "I was defending myself." She sipped her tea. "It's called self-respect." He shook his head. "You're unbelievable." She grinned. "You mean fascinating." There was that electric ease between them again, the kind that lived in teasing but hummed with something warmer underneath. Caleb had learned that whenever Ira teased him, it wasn't just mischief. It was her way of testing boundaries, seeing how close she could lean before he'd pull away. And he never did. That evening, she helped him clean up the tools. Every time their hands brushed, she acted like it was an accident. Every time he looked up, she was already looking away. At one point, she bent to grab a rag, her tail brushing against his arm. It was soft, warm, alive. She froze instantly, eyes wide. He did too. They stayed that way for a moment too long. Then she flicked her tail against him, deliberately smirking. "Soft, right?" He exhaled through a laugh. "You're aware you're weaponizing fluff? Foxes adapt." She moved past him toward the sink, humming lightly, but her tail flicked him one more time, so quick he almost thought it was accidental. Almost. Later that night, he found her perched on the balcony railing, city lights painting her hair in molten orange. Her tail was freshly brushed, silky and gleaming. "You're not mad about earlier, right?" he asked, stepping beside her. "Mad?" She tilted her head. "You worry too much. You got your tail caught in a wheel and survived." "Barely," he smiled faintly. "You could have been hurt." She turned to him then, expression softening. "You always worry when I'm hurt, even when it's something silly." He met her eyes. "That's kind of what caring means." Era blinked, her voice lowering. "You care then?" He hesitated, hard thudding. "Of course I do." For a moment, she didn't speak. Her tail brushed his arm again, gentle this time, not teasing, but thankful. "Good," she whispered, "because I like being cared for." Then she smiled, bright and playful again, as if nothing serious had been said at all. "Also, your bike still hates me," he laughed. "Well, add it to the list of appliances you've angered. Alongside the toaster and the laundry spirit," she said solemnly. "It's a long list." Her laughter danced on the wind, tail curling lazily around her knees. And though Caleb said nothing more that night, his thoughts echoed loud enough to fill the silence between them. "She's chaos, beautiful, ridiculous chaos, and I think I'm falling for her." Ayura's ears twitched almost imperceptibly. She didn't turn to face him, but her smile lingered, small and secret. The rain had decided to stay for the weekend. It drummed softly on the windows, turning the apartment into a cocoon of quiet light and faint thunder. Caleb had canceled his repair appointments and declared it a stay-in day. Hera naturally had interpreted that as snack and couch day, and was already buried under a blanket mountain with 3 bags of chips and a bowl of noodles precariously balanced on her knees. "What even is this?" she asked, squinting at the hollow projector. The film title glowed across the air, Hearts in Orbit, the human AI love story. Caleb shrugged, remote in hand. Something people used to call a romantic classic. "My coworker said it was emotional." "Emotional?" Hera repeated with a dramatic sniff. "Perfect. I love chaos disguised as feelings. You just like yelling at characters." She grinned. That too. He sank into the other end of the couch, trying to stay a safe distance from the snack debris field. But halfway through the movie, somewhere between the android's confession scene and the tear-airy human proposal, Hera had quietly drifted closer, so close their shoulders brushed. She didn't seem to notice. Her tail lay between them like a living question mark, twitching softly every time the film music swelled. When the proposal scene began, she turned to him suddenly. "Is this how humans do it?" Caleb blinked. "Do what?" "Choose someone." He laughed awkwardly. "Well, not everyone does it with violins and dramatic lighting, but you still ask. You have to speak the words out loud." "Usually, yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Why?" Her gaze lingered on the hollow screen, but her voice had gone quieter. "In my tribe, we just listen. If you love someone, they don't have to say it. You can hear it." He tilted his head. "Hear it?" "In the pauses," she said softly. "In the way they breathe when you're near, or the way they whisper when they think you are asleep." Caleb's stomach did a small, guilty flip. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she replied, and for a moment the playful spark in her eyes dimmed. "Sometimes you hear something you're not supposed to." He opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the movie's credits rolled, breaking the spell. Hera stretched, yawning, tail flicking lazily over his lap before she stood. "Well," she said, voice back to its usual mischief, "if this is how humans confess, I'm disappointed. I expected fireworks." "You want fireworks in the living room?" he teased. "Maybe a small one. Romantic explosion." He chuckled, but the air between them felt different, thicker somehow, like the rain outside had seeped into the silence. Ara went quiet for a moment, then said lightly, "If a human ever proposed to me, I'd probably laugh." Caleb frowned, unsure if she was joking. "Laugh?" She shrugged, eyes half hidden beneath her fringe. "Humans are fragile. They say things like forever, but they break so easily." Her words stung more than they should have. "We're not that fragile. Maybe not physically," she said, looking at him now. "But you hide feelings like glass and paper. One wrong word, and she snapped her fingers. Shatter." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The silence stretched long enough that the sound of rain became the only thing keeping the room alive. Finally, stood and gathered her empty snack bowls. "You're quiet again," she said softly. "It's strange. I can hear everything else about you. Your footsteps, your sighs, the way your heart speeds up when you're frustrated. But when you get quiet, I can't hear anything at all." "Forget it," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "I'll clean these up." He watched her disappear into the kitchen, her tail dragging slightly behind her, a subtle tell that something inside her had wilted. When she returned, she didn't sit beside him. Instead, she curled up at the far end of the couch, pretending to scroll through her datapad. The glow from the screen flickered across her face, highlighting the faint crease between her brows. Caleb wanted to say something, to joke, to apologize, to bridge the invisible space between them, but he didn't know how without breaking something delicate. He glanced at her mug on the table, the one she always used at night. It had a chipped handle and a little fox emblem she'd drawn on it herself. Before going to bed, she always left it beside his tools on the workbench, a quiet ritual that neither of them had ever acknowledged. That night, she left it beside his bed instead. He found it after she'd gone to sleep, still half full of tea. A silent apology? A peace offering? He couldn't tell. He set it carefully on the nightstand and sat down on the edge of his bed, listening to the faint patter of rain and the even fainter sound of her breathing through the wall. He wished, not for the first time, that words came as easily to him as they did to her. He also wished he could tell her what he whispered every night when she fell asleep on the couch, how much she changed the rhythm of his life, how much softer everything felt since she moved in. Instead, he whispered it to the dark, to the sound of rain, and to the small twitch of her ears through the thin wall between them. "I wish I could marry her." The rain swallowed the words whole. Or so he thought, because in the other room, Era's tail curled slightly around herself, and her lips curved in a faint, sleeping smile. It was well past midnight when Caleb finally gave up trying to fix the flickering lamp on his desk. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a hush so deep it felt like the whole city was holding its breath. The faint hum of distant hovercars drifted through the cracked window, mixed with the soft rhythm of Era's quiet snores from the couch. She'd fallen asleep there again, half buried beneath her blanket fortress, tail coiled around her knees like a furry shield. The hollow screen still glowed faintly, paused on some half-finished nature documentary she'd insisted on watching for research. A line of empty snack wrappers formed a kind of battlefield around her. Caleb smiled faintly as he unplugged the projector and gathered the trash. Careful not to wake her, she looked peaceful when she slept. Ears twitching, lips curved slightly, as if she were dreaming of something that made her happy. Every now and then, her tail flicked once, like punctuation to an unseen thought. He found himself lingering near the couch, staring a bit longer than he meant to. The way the dim city light brushed across her face made her look softer, almost human, and yet impossibly other. It was easy to forget she was part of a species that could hear a conversation through walls, or smell a lie before it was told. When she was like this, messy hair, one ear flopped sideways, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito, she just looked right, he whispered mostly to himself. You're ridiculous. Her ear twitched. He froze. Then, realizing she hadn't stirred, exhaled quietly and rubbed the back of his neck. And I'm talking to you again, he muttered. Brilliant. He started to turn away, but his heart wouldn't let him move. Instead, he sat down on the edge of the coffee table across from her, elbows resting on his knees. You know, he said softly, I fixed things my whole life. Machines, tools, apartments, always something broken. But you came along, and suddenly everything felt like it worked again. Even me. She didn't stir. The words hung in the air like fragile glass. He swallowed, voice barely audible. I wish I could tell you that, without making it weird. I wish you could just hear it without me saying it wrong. A long pause. The hum of the city seemed to fade completely. I wish I could marry her, he breathed. The words came out gentler than ever before. Half confession, half prayer. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Era's ears twitched once, twice. Slowly, she stirred, stretching beneath the blanket. Caleb's eyes widened as she sat up, blinking sleepily at him. Her voice was soft, drowsy, but unmistakably clear. My answer is yes, he froze. What? Ara rubbed one eye with the back of her hand, her tail curling lazily around her ankles. You said you wanted to marry me. Caleb's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You heard that? She smiled faintly, eyes half-lidded. I hear a lot of things, especially the things you whisper when you think I'm asleep. He blinked, trying to form a sentence that didn't involve spontaneous combustion. I didn't. That wasn't serious, she interrupted, tilting her head. You sounded serious. He gestured vaguely at the air as if words might materialize there and rescue him. That's not usually something you overhear. Arya yawned, the sound delicate and soft. You humans whisper the most interesting things. Confessions, wishes, half-dreams. Her gaze locked onto his, suddenly sharp beneath the sleepy calm. Do you mean it? He swallowed hard. Well, don't lie, she said gently, tail flicking once. I can smell when you do. Caleb looked down at his hands, then back at her. There was no way out of this one. No clever dodge, no shrug to deflect it. The truth was a living, pulsing thing in his chest, and she already heard it anyway, so he nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. I meant it. For a moment, either of them moved. The city's low hum filled the silence between heartbeats. Then slowly, Era's expression softened into something unreadable. Half amusement, half wonder. You know, she murmured. For someone so bad at talking, you say the sweetest things when you think no one's listening, he exhaled, shaky. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. She stood still, wrapped in her blanket, and walked toward him. You didn't put me anywhere. You told the truth. That's rare. When she reached him, she stopped just close enough for him to feel the warmth radiating from her. Her tail brushed his knee, a soft whisper of fur and intent. Then, in that same quiet tone that carried more gravity than 1,000 grand speeches, she said again, My answer is yes. He stared at her, searching her face for the joke, waiting for the smirk, the punchline. But there was none. Her gaze was steady, calm, and completely serious. Ilera. She smiled faintly. Don't look so shocked, human. You're not the only one who whispers things. His heart skipped. What do you mean? Her eyes glimmered like molten gold in the dim light. You'll hear them someday when you're listening as closely as I do. And before he could reply, she brushed past him, her tail trailing across his lap like a promise. Good night, Caleb, she whispered. He sat frozen long after she'd gone back to her nest of blankets, brains still catching up to what had just happened. When he finally lay down, sleep didn't come easily. The words replayed again and again in his head, a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. My answer is yes. And though the city was silent, he could almost swear he heard her smiling. Caleb woke to the smell of toast. That in itself was suspicious. He sat up, blinking blurrily at the sunlight bleeding through the curtains. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. For a brief, blissful moment, he thought maybe he dreamed the entire thing, the whisper, the confession, her answer. It had to have been a half-conscious fantasy, and one of those dreams that cling to the edges of morning. Then he heard humming. Her humming. He froze mid-motion. That soft, lilting tune that always crept under his skin. The same one she hummed when she was smug. Ira, he called voice. In the kitchen, she sang back. Don't come in unless you want your socks covered in flour. That didn't sound promising. He rubbed his face, groaned, and decided it was safer to face her than spend another second wondering whether he'd actually proposed in his sleep. When he stepped into the kitchen, his brain short-circuited. Ara was wearing one of his old shirts, half-buttoned, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, and a pair of fuzzy socks that absolutely weren't hers. The counters were covered in what appeared to be every breakfast ingredient known to man. There was a stack of pancakes on one plate, a suspiciously charred omelet on another, and a small jar of honey she was currently sniffing like a wine critic. "Morning," she said cheerfully, tail flicking as she turned. "You're up late." He blinked at the disaster zone. Finally, she breathed. "Do you know how hard it's been pretending I didn't hear that a dozen times already?" He laughed. Relief and affection tangled together. "I'm never going to live this down, am I?" "Not a chance." She leaned in close enough for her forehead to rest lightly against his. "But I'll make it up to you with pancakes tomorrow." "Please don't," he murmured, smiling. Her laughter was soft, melodic. Then she added quieter. "In my world, saying someone's name like that is our version of a proposal." He blinked. "Then I guess I just proposed." Her tail flicked once, brushing against his hand, and I just said yes. The city stretched endlessly below them. But for that moment, it felt small, like the entire world fit within the space between their words. They stayed that way for a long time, neither rushing the silence nor breaking it. The only sound was the soft wind and the quiet rhythm of two hearts finally speaking the same language. Behira smiled against his shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "I think this counts as scent bonding, too." He chuckled. "Please don't bite me to prove it." "No promises?" And for once, he didn't mind. Morning light spilled through the thin curtains like melted gold, settling across the mismatched furniture that defined their little apartment. The city outside was alive. Distant sirens, vending drones humming by, the chatter of markets. But inside it was slow and warm and quiet. Caleb stirred awake on the couch, the soft weight of something furry draped across his stomach. For a moment his half-asleep brain thought it was a blanket. Then the blanket sighed. "Era," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "You're heavy." "Am," she replied from somewhere under the pile of blankets. "I'm emotionally supportive." "Wait, go back to sleep," he chuckled, glancing down to find her sprawled halfway across him, her tail covering both of them like a makeshift comforter. Her hair was a crimson halo against the couch pillow, ears twitching faintly as the sunlight caught their edges. She was awake, barely, but doing her best impression of someone who wasn't. "Do fox women usually hog all the blankets?" he asked, stretching carefully beneath her. "Tradition," she mumbled. "We claim territory in our sleep." "Great. So, I'm part of your ecosystem now." She cracked when I opened, giving him a sly smile. "You've been domesticated, Caleb. It's far too late to run." He laughed quietly. "I think you domesticated me the moment you set fire to my toaster." She yawned, stretching lazily before sitting up, tail flicking over his chest. "You're welcome. You were getting too attached to that toaster." "Attached? It was a toaster. It had a name." "AR I did not name." "You called it Buddy." He groaned into his hands. "You've been eavesdropping again." "Always," she said with a mischievous grin, sliding off the couch. "How else am I supposed to learn human mating rituals?" He froze Maidon. "Excuse me, what?" "Relax," she said over her shoulder, patting toward the kitchen. "I'm talking about breakfast." He blinked. "That's not better." She hummed cheerfully, already rummaging through the pantry. "Do you want toast or another culinary masterpiece?" "I'd prefer something that doesn't require a fire extinguisher." "No promises?" she called back. Caleb leaned back against the couch, smiling to himself despite everything. The apartment was messy. 2 mugs on the counter, socks in mysterious places. A flickering light that still hadn't been fixed, but it was theirs. He stood, stretching the stiffness out of his back, and walked to the kitchen where was pretending she understood how measurements worked. The scene was its usual blend of chaos and comfort. Flour dusted across the counter, a cracked eggshell teetering on the edge of the sink, and Era humming happily with a whisk in her hand. "I need help?" he asked. "No," she said, whisking too confidently. "I've mastered the art of pancakes." "You said that last time," he reminded her. "And the time before," she agreed, still whisking. "But this time I used the correct flour." "Probably." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're terrifyingly optimistic." "It's a cultural strength," she said proudly, flicking a bit of batter onto his shirt. He looked down at the splatter, then at her. "You did that on purpose?" "Maybe." She giggled when he flicked a drop back at her, tails swishing like a metronome of mischief. Soon they were both laughing, flinging flour and batter with the reckless abandon of 2 people who knew the cleanup would take hours and didn't care in the slightest. When the chaos settled, the kitchen looked like a snowstorm had passed through it. Ara stood at the counter, covered in flour from nose to tail tip, holding a slightly lopsided pancake aloft like it was a sacred artifact. "See?" she said triumphantly. "Perfection," Caleb raised an eyebrow. "It's shaped like a fox." "Obviously, I'm an artist." He smiled, shaking his head as he reached for a plate. "You're something." "All right." They sat together at the tiny kitchen table, the sunlight catching dust motes as they drifted lazily between them. Ara poured honey, far too much, onto her pancake, and Caleb watched as she took a blissful bite, tail flicking contentedly. "You're staring," she said, without looking up. He smirked. "You're just entertaining." She tilted her head, pretending to think. Maybe you do like living with me, I plead the fifth. Too late? You confessed on the roof, he sighed. Are you ever going to let me live that down? Never, she said sweetly, licking honey off her fingers. He leaned back, watching her as she devoured another bite of pancake, smiling at the small streak of flour still smudged on her cheek. You know, he said softly, for all the noise and chaos you bring into this place, it feels empty when you're not around. Era froze mid-bite, then slowly looked up at him. Her tail curled once deliberately. You're saying nice things again, Caleb. He shrugged. It's morning. I'll go back to sarcasm by lunch. She grinned, her voice dropping to a whisper. I like the morning version of you. He smiled back. Yeah, well, don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. She leaned forward, eyes gleaming with warmth and mischief all at once. Your secret's safe with me. I'm very good at keeping whispers. And somehow, that line, half joke, half truth, was all it took to remind him of everything that had changed. There was no need for grand declarations or nervous whispers anymore. They'd said what mattered. The rest was just living, messy, funny, sweet living. Caleb reached over and brushed the flour from her cheek. You've got something there? Smile softened. You missed a spot, she whispered, and leaned in to kiss him soft, warm, brief enough to leave him blinking after, wondering if it had really happened. When she pulled back, she added, There, perfect flower and all, especially that. The city hummed beyond the window, but their little world felt quiet and infinite all at once. An apartment, 2 hearts, one future that smelled faintly of honey and pancakes. And somewhere in the corner, Buddy the toaster blinked its lone light, miraculously repaired overnight. Ira noticed at first, ears perking. Hey, she said with a grin. You fixed him? Caleb smiled, eyes still on her. Yeah, he said softly. Turns out, I fix things for the people I love. Her tail flicked slow and happy. Then I hope I stay broken forever. Not a chance, he murmured. You're already home. And she was. 6 months later, the apartment looked almost the same. And yet, everything about it felt different. The flickering light had finally been replaced. The wall calendar was now a collage of paw prints, doodles, and post-it notes that said things like, Buy more honey? And do not microwave metal bowls again. The once cluttered table now held a thriving little plant that Era swore was a symbol of commitment, but which Caleb strongly suspected was just an excuse for her to talk to something while he was at work. And in the middle of it all, sat Alira curled up on the couch in her favorite oversized hoodie, her tail draped lazily over the armrest as she scrolled through an old holotab of human cultural phenomena. Did you know? She said suddenly. Bad humans invented something called couple yoga. Caleb, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by scattered tools and the half-gooded remains of a hollow clock, looked up wearily. Is this going to end with you falling on me again? She smirked. Statistically? Yes, he groaned. Pass. But it's supposed to strengthen emotional bonds, she said in her best imitation of a motivational announcer voice. You wouldn't want our relationship to weaken, would you? I'd rather survive it, he replied dryly. Ira laughed, a sound that still managed to fill the room like sunlight every single time. It wasn't delicate or rehearsed. It was genuine, unguarded, alive. Somewhere between a purr and a giggle, it always hit him right in the chest. He smiled despite himself, setting the screwdriver down. You know, for someone who's supposed to be a mysterious, otherworldly being, you're incredibly good at turning my life into a sitcom. That's because humans make excellent straight men, she teased. He raised an eyebrow. You realize that's a comedic term. Yes, she interrupted with a smirk. Don't ruin it. She shifted to face him fully, tail curling neatly around her. Honestly, I like it this way. The quiet mornings, the burnt toast, you muttering to yourself when you think I'm not listening. He blinked. I don't mutter. You do mutter, she said confidently. Yesterday you said, and I quote, if she breaks the kettle, I'm moving to Mars. Caleb groaned. You weren't even in the room. She tapped her ear with a grin. Technically, I'm always in the room. Terrifying. Romantic, she countered. Creepy, devoted. He laughed, holding up his hands. All right, fine, you win. Just maybe pretend you don't hear every single thing I say. Her tail flicked playfully, but then I'd miss all the good parts. He gave her a look. There are no good parts in my muttering. Oh, really? She said sweetly, reaching for the hollow tab and tapping it to record mode. Then why don't we test that theory? No, don't. Too late. The device replayed a faint audio snippet of his voice from earlier that morning. I swear she gets cuter every day. Caleb's face went crimson. You recorded that accidentally? She said innocently, though her grin gave her away. I was testing the mic's sensitivity for science. He buried his face in his hands. You're going to destroy me emotionally. Maybe, she said, laughing again. He peeked through his fingers, trying to glare, but failing. You enjoy this too much. I do, she said simply. Then, after a beat, her voice softened. But it's not just for fun, Caleb. You whisper things that make me feel safe. Like, no matter how loud the world gets, there's always one voice that means home. The sincerity in her tone hit him harder than he expected. He lowered his hands, meeting her gaze. You still call this place home? She nodded. Home isn't walls or floors. It's where you can hear someone's heartbeat without trying. He smiled quietly. That's actually beautiful. I've been practicing human poetry, she said proudly. Want to hear my latest one? Do I have a choice? No, she cleared her throat dramatically. Roses are red, tails are divine. Your toaster survived, so you're officially mine. He stared. You're banned from poetry night. She burst out laughing again, falling sideways onto the couch, tail flicking wildly as she tried to breathe between fits of giggles. Caleb couldn't help but laugh with her. It was infectious, ridiculous, and perfect. When the laughter faded, she shifted to look at him, her expression softening. You know, she murmured. Sometimes I think about that first night. When you whispered that wish, Caleb's smile faltered a little, his voice gentler now. You still remember that? Ira tilted her head. How could I forget? It was the first time someone said they wanted me in their life. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. He reached up, brushing his thumb against her cheek. That wasn't a wish, you know. It was a promise I didn't know how to say out loud. She leaned into his hand, eyes half-lidded. And you finally did. I finally did. Her tail curled around his wrist, soft and deliberate. Then we're even. You whispered first, I answered second, and now we just live. He chuckled. That's the plan. The evening drifted around them, city lights flickering through the window as the day faded into quiet comfort. Ira shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Hey, Caleb, she murmured. Yeah, if you whisper again tonight, she said, her voice drowsy, teasing but tender. I promise I'll hear it. He smiled. Then I'll make it something worth hearing. Her laughter was the last sound before sleep claimed them both soft, bright, and impossibly alive. And somewhere between her breathing and the hum of the city outside, Caleb realized that he'd finally found it. Not the perfect life, not the quiet he once thought he needed, but the sound of her laughter filling every space that used to be empty. Their apartment, their chaos, their love, their world. Thanks for listening. Subscribe and join us for the next tale of love, laughter, and the stars.